Bear Burrito podcast.
Bear Burrito.
Bear Burrito.
Sauce on the burrito.
All right.
We're still working out the introduction.
We're still working out the intro. Maybe we'll get professional about it someday.
It might be different every time. Who knows?
This one has also been recorded the exact same day as the other two.
What's that? 3 in a row.
3 in a row. Trifecta
Right.
Grand Slam.
Yeah.
So today we are talking about inspiration.
Inspiration. Things that have inspired us. People that have inspired us. Quotes that have inspired us. Literature that's inspired us. Trips that have inspired us. Who made you who you are today? Who gave you the love for the outdoors? Who gave you the passions that you do? We all are human. We all need inspiration. We all gain inspiration from different sources. And I think that the source of those things, you know, the source of the ideas that we have and the philosophies that we hold and the beliefs that we have is very important to knowing who we are. And so we're going to share a little bit of ourselves with you as we share with you the sources of our inspiration and our beliefs today.
Yes. And there are many directions that we can take this, as Keegan just pointed out.
Yeah.
So as you listen to this podcast episode, just go along for the ride. And as we talk about who, what, when, where, why, think to yourself as well about who has done this for you. I think one thing that we would like for you to do this episode that we have not talked about before this episode that I just now thought of would be a cool idea, would be maybe to take notes about who inspires you, what inspires you, and to make those things a bigger part of your life. Because I think that's something that Keegan and I have done in many ways. He has a mentor who has inspired him, I'm sure, and he meets with his mentor. There are books, there are songs, there are movies, there are different things that have inspired me that I continually go to. There are even memories that have inspired me that I've had of like my grandparents or other people that inspire me that I consistently think of whenever I need that inspiration.
And experiences.
So as you're listening to this, there are definitely going to be relatable moments that pop up in your mind. I would encourage you on your phone to like write it down real quick. If you have a pen and paper to write it down, or on your computer, just anywhere to jot this stuff down as you listen to our episode today.
Yeah, because again, the purpose of this podcast, again, is like two friends talking about our outdoors and our passions and our loves and our interests. But also, you know, the purpose of our lives and of our business is to improve the individual and to foster character building in the individual. And if we can somehow, through this ridiculous source of media, inspire you to be more self-reflective and to be introspectively intelligent, then that is what we want to do. Yeah. That's our goal. You know, so if you want to take notes about your past and things that have inspired you and that helps you in some way, well, man, that's what we want.
Yeah, right? And post comments on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook about those things as well. Send us a message about those things as well. And maybe we'll be able to like have a whole episode devoted to what people have said has inspired them.
That'd be awesome.
And it's not just Keegan and I who talk about it, but we can hear a huge range of people who have been inspired by different places and things.
Yeah, please send us your stories. We would love to take the time to look at each individual one.
And appropriate them for our own game, for the podcast.
For our own game, for our own selfish game.
Well, I'd like to start off this episode of Inspiration with a quote from one of my biggest inspirations.
Yes, sir.
Ron Swanson.
The legend.
The legend. The quote is, "Dear frozen yogurt, you are the celery of desserts. Be ice cream or be nothing."
Wise words. Wise words.
The second quote, that's just a fun quote of him because I read that one accidentally instead of the other one, but that was pretty funny.
That's pretty great, yeah.
The real one, as it pertains to the outdoors, is fishing relaxes me. It's like yoga, except I still get to kill something. And that's sometimes how I feel about the outdoors.
Yeah.
You know, I love yoga. I love even like working out in the gym. I love like lifting weights. Whenever I lift weights, I think of like a bear attacking me.
Right.
You know, I imagine it. When I'm running, when I used to run with my wife, I hate running with a passion.
Right.
But whenever I was running, I would imagine some guy running out of the woods with a knife, ready to kill my wife or mug her and me, and I had to defend her, I would think of those things as I'm running, and it would just like boost me to go further.
Well, you know, some people might think that's ridiculous, but I honestly think that's great. I think that's great because, you know, when you're training your body physically, like, you should think that it's for practical purposes.
Yeah.
You know, because I know some people out there is like, I want to train to be aesthetically pleasing, you know, and that's fine.
Right.
That's great. I'm not going to look down on you for doing that, but you got to think that traditionally people also train their bodies to be practically skilled at physical things. And, you know, that I like that you say that, Nick, because it brings me back to, you know, when I was back in military training, when I was working out, you know, with my buddies and my squad mates, you know, if I was sucking one day, you know, and I was having trouble on something we were doing, like going on a run, and I was sucking, they, you know, would encourage me to go harder, train harder, go faster, push more, because it came from a place of love, because, you know, they wanted to go to war with somebody who could keep up.
Yeah.
They wanted to go to war with somebody who could go the distance, you know? It was a place where they didn't want me to die. So, you know, they wanted me to train as hard as I could because they didn't want me to die, and they knew that I would have a greater chance of survival if I trained harder. And so I would push them in the same way, and that bred some sort of camaraderie and love that, you know, I miss, because that was amazing. But I see what you're saying, and I think it's very important that you have a practical motivation for your training and all of that too. And it's a good motivation. It's
and
great.
I think it's those moments too, like you just said, that inspire you the most.
Yeah.
To do the most. There have been so many, like when we're all sitting in math class, at least the majority of us, there's some who sit in math class and are just like, I love math.
Right.
I can't get enough of math. I can't get enough of geometry. Can't get enough of algebra. Calc 2 or something like that. I never made it that far. I don't know if that's a real thing. But
maybe.
I think I made it to algebra 1
right.
or 2. But there's some people sitting in that class who are like, I love this. Other people, the typical line is, I'm never going to use this.
Right.
You know, and so, which you are going to use it, but math classes have done a poor job of showing you how you would use it in real life scenarios and making it interesting and making you want to learn it. I don't know what they're doing nowadays, but in my days, that's how it was. And the same thing for these moments like this, for hiking or whatever else. There are moments where you need to be shown this is valuable for real life situations. Vocational jobs, vocational colleges should be through the roof right now because of how practical and useful they are, but sometimes they're not. And I think some of my biggest inspiring moments have come from moments where I realized how practical a skill or characteristic or something was.
Well, I want to take that, you know, go back there to what you just said about, you know, the algebra class, and am I ever going to use this and all that? Like, you know, as an educator, I'm honest with my kids, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just teaching today. I was at a middle school and talking to middle school students, and, you know, I was straight up with them, and I love what you just said, Nick. I want to expand on that.
Go for it. I can't wait to feel great about how much you're expanding on my thoughts.
Well, I shared with these middle school kids a quote that has inspired me, you know, as a man and in my life. And the quote is that your individual actions become habits, and your habits become your character, and your character becomes who you are. And so I love that quote, and I try to live my life by that quote. Is that, you know, everything that I decide to do each day can become a habit. My habits become my character becomes who I am. And to give an example, what I said to these middle school students was, you know, I was giving them some work to do, right? And as they were doing it silently, and I started talking to them as they were filling out the work. And I was just like, you know, as you guys already probably have figured out, there's some things in middle school and there's some things in high school, there's work you're going to do. That doesn't matter. And, you know, they all perk up at that point. They're like, what is he saying? They're like, I mean, I always knew that was true, but I didn't think the teacher would say it. And I was like, I'm going to be dishonest. Some things you're doing, they're BS, right? Some of the things you're doing, like, it doesn't matter. And when are you going to use this? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, but I'm going to make the argument that you should do it anyway. And so now they're listening. I'm like, here's the argument that you should do it anyway. Your individual actions become habits, become character because who you are. So let's say that today I give you a worksheet to do. You think it's busy work, right? You think you don't have to do it. If you don't do it, it won't matter. So you choose today to not do your work, to not force yourself to do something that you know you should do. You decide to take the easy route and decide not to do it. Okay, that's fine. You do that today. Tomorrow rolls around. Since you made that choice yesterday, it is now easier, infinitely easier, for you to make that same choice today.
Yep.
Now, today, another sheet of paper comes in front of you, another assignment is put in front of you. It is now easier for you as a student to say to yourself, well, yesterday I decided not to do it. Today I'm going to decide not to do it also.
Yeah.
But now you make the easy choice again. I'm not going to do this work. It doesn't matter. And you might even lie to yourself and say, I'll do it when it does matter. You know, I don't need to do this now because it's just school, it's just training.
Right.
But when I'm in the workforce and when it matters, I'll do it. But you won't do it today, so you choose not to. Well, now, before you know it, you have created a habit. You are habitually not doing things that you don't want to do. You are not training yourself to do things, to force yourself to do things, to be disciplined, to do things you don't want to do. You are, in fact, training yourself the opposite. You're training yourself to take the easy way out, to not do things that you think are unimportant, right?
Yeah.
And so now you form that habit. Now you're not every day, you're not doing things you don't want to do, or it's very hard for you to do things you don't want to do. Now that becomes your character. You become a lazier person. You become a person that takes the easy way out. And that becomes who you are. Before you know it, you're out of school, you go to the workplace, you thought you would do it when it matters, but you never trained yourself to do it when it matters. So now you won't. And now your peers are surpassing you because they are forcing themselves to do things they don't want to do. Your peers are being disciplined and they're getting work done. And you're not, because you're undisciplined. And you trained yourself to be undisciplined. And that's what I told the kids, because that's how it is. You know, you won't do it when it matters if you don't train that way. Mm-hmm. You know, if you train yourself to do things when it doesn't matter, you will do it when it does. Yeah. But you can't if you don't. And so that's what I told the kids. I was like, so, you know, this might be busy work, but you are building a habit today that you'll take into the rest of your life. And of course, they're middle school kids, so some of them don't get that. You know, that goes totally over some of their heads.
They can't think past like 5 minutes from now.
Exactly. You know, so some of those words are lost on them. But maybe when they grow up, they'll remember that, and they'll think, I am forming habits each day. And, you know, like just yesterday, like I'll be presented with a choice, you know, to act selfishly or act unselfishly. And I'll have that thought in the back of my head. It's like, what I choose today will make the choice tomorrow easier. So if I choose to act unselfishly today, it'll make acting unselfishly tomorrow easier. I'll build that habit. So I'll choose that today. You know, because nothing in life, nothing is done in a vacuum. Yeah. Everything is connected, and you form habits so easily. So you have to be very careful with what you choose to do each day. That's just a quote that really inspired me, though. You know,
here's something I'm curious of. I think that people are motivated by who they think that they can become.
Okay.
You know, so for those students that you have, they might think to themselves, I want to be an NBA player. Right. Why do I need to learn about Thomas Jefferson and the kite, and if he had a key on the string or not? You know, I don't know if that's who that was or not.
I have no idea.
I was that
No,
kid.
that was Benjamin Franklin.
Obviously, I was that student.
You've delegitimized us.
I've delegitimized.
You made us seem dumb.
Okay. One of those figures, I'm speaking as the student, he doesn't care. He or she doesn't care sometimes about knowing all those small little facts, because they're going to be the next LeBron James dunking on Steph Curry. You know, dunking on these point guards or whatever else. I don't know anything about basketball either, but I know dunking on people is something that you want to aspire towards.
Right, that's a good thing. That's a good thing in basketball.
And so some of them don't realize how much hard work LeBron James does.
Exactly.
They do not know the fraction of the hard work that LeBron James puts into his game.
It's not just that he wanted it bad. It's that he formed the habits and disciplines to make it happen.
Exactly. And when he got old enough to realize that he had made so many mistakes at a young age, he fixed them. Right. He started fixing them and everything. Now he's even more than an NBA player. He's like a business man.
Legend.
He's a legend. He's an icon. He's someone who people argue is one of the greatest of all time.
Right. They're comparing him with Michael Jordan right now.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's crazy.
And so in my brain, I think to myself, okay, I'm going to be in, I've never been in your shoes where I'm actually teaching in a classroom, middle schoolers or high schoolers or anything. I've been in youth groups in some settings, But I've had this idea of, okay, who do you want to be? Who do you aspire to be?
Right.
Now let me tell you a little bit about that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've had students in youth group back whenever I was volunteering who wanted to be the next LeBron James, who wanted to be Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, all these guys, but they were not motivated at all.
Right.
All they wanted to do, instead of being on the court, practicing their skills, they wanted to be playing NBA, Madden, and all these other games, you know. They wanted to be on the PS2. They wanted to be talking over the, wireless with their friends on the headset and everything.
And see, that's the difference between like a dream and a goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like you can dream to be that way, but if it's your goal to be that way, then you have steps that you're taking to get there.
You will always wake up from your dreams.
Right.
You will never grasp a dream. It will always be something you wake up from and realize fantasy. That it's a fantasy.
Right.
But goals, you can reach those goals. Dreams are only there to inspire you a little bit.
Right.
They're only there to show you what could be. And it's those goals that you set that show you what reality can come.
Right. And I'm not saying that your dreams can't be goals.
Right.
But like the difference is that you're making progress towards a goal. And a dream is just something you hope for.
Exactly.
And like, you can hope for a goal, but you have steps that you're taking to get there. And you're trying with all your might to get there. Whereas a dream is just something like that might be cool.
Right.
Oh
yeah. And I think this is something where other communities do really great, I think, from my perspective, at inspiring people. Like, I'll look at like inner city communities. I'll look at like the black community. Mm-hmm. I saw this video of Kendrick Lamar. He's one of the most iconic rappers of today. Right. He walks into a high school full of, other students who are black and who are aspiring to be something greater than maybe what they're seeing in their community.
Absolutely.
And he's showing them, like, hey, this is who I am. I came from Compton. I came from selling drugs. I came from being, like, in gangs, being mixed up in all this stuff.
Right.
And I am who I am today. And I'm not just, throwing money around and doing drugs or doing anything else. I'm making something of myself.
Right.
I'm being smart. And I wish I would have paid more attention in high school doing this. And I think that if students can have the right inspirational person, right motivations, the right things, they can do anything that they want to.
Absolutely.
But sadly, in a world where social media is like, you gain so much success by punching someone in the nuts, by having,
pranked ya,
presumptuous body features,
right?
Your big body features, by doing weird things over the internet that aren't real, that are just fake. Those are seen as success.
You'd be so surprised by the amount of kids in schools that, when traditionally when you ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, they're like, oh, a firefighter, oh, a policeman, or a doctor. Today, it's like 60% of kids, I want to be a YouTuber.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be Logan Paul.
Yeah. It's false.
Right.
That's
right.
That's something where it's like, how do you set that as your goal? What steps do you take to do that?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I'm not.
And you know what? And I just want to break down the stigma too. It's okay to be a YouTuber. It's okay to be someone who makes their living playing Madden online. It's okay.
But you have to be disciplined.
But exactly. You have to be disciplined. And this is just from my perspective. I think that you should have the right motivations as to why you're doing it. And you should be willing to live an inspirational life from it.
Right.
There are guys who play Madden, girls who play Madden and other sports online, who probably have like really selfish lives, but they will probably end up in the gutter. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who live very selfless lives and will go on probably to be, consistent and successful and help other people rise up. And it's those people who you should aspire to be. Exactly. You should aspire to live an inspirational life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you have to understand, especially kids, you have to teach kids that success is not something that's given to them. In this age of everybody gets a participation trophy, success is not something that's given to people. Like Kendrick Lamar, like Michael Jordan, like LeBron James, like, even esports players, anybody, YouTubers. Like, if you want to make it, if you want to have success in that field, you have to work for it.
Right.
It's something where you have to discipline yourself to meet your goals, it's not something that you can just hope happens to you, and it happens to you.
Right.
I'm sure for some people, maybe it does happen that way, but I'd say overwhelmingly, you put the work in to make yourself get there. You have to be lucky. You have to have that, that great combination of being lucky and putting the work in and being disciplined. And when it all comes together, something amazing can happen.
Yeah.
And then when you get there, like you said, you got to make sure that you're a person of character when you get there. And that's what we want to do is create leaders who, when they have success, can be role models, can be people of character. Yeah. Because that's lost today. It's lost.
Now, I'm assuming you have this point of view because you've had certain inspirational role models or certain things that have inspired you to be the way you are. What are some of those top things that have inspired you or people?
I think that everybody's original role model is who they grew up with. So my parents, first of all, like my dad is an immigrant from Honduras, and he came to America when he was older in his 20s to attend college, and that's where my mom. My mom's American, and so I'm half Hispanic, half white, and my dad, it became a huge success in the United States, getting his citizenship, and 7 years to get his citizenship, working hard the whole time, and was working on factory lines and for auto companies, and worked his way up, and got better and better jobs, and eventually became extremely successful in the field that he wanted to be, and got his degree and went to college and married my mom and had me, and it's like he's an inspiration to me because of how hard he worked and how he never gave up. And just the fact that he came here not even knowing English. Yeah. And he learned the language. I can't imagine how privileged I am to grow up just knowing English and living in a place where everybody speaks my language. My dad didn't have that. Right. It's crazy to me that he was able to accomplish as much as he did. And it's but my dad is an extremely disciplined man. He's very organized. He's very goal-oriented. He sets goals and he accomplishes them. He tries hard. And his life is also always about other people. He always put us first. He put his wife first in his marriage. He put his kids first. And he worked hard for all of us to make us have a good life. And I really admire that about him. He inspired me in that way because in order to have success, you have to work hard. You have to make sacrifices. In order to be a person of character, you have to make sacrifices. That's what I believe as a Christian too, is that, you come third. It's God, others, and then you. And my dad has really exemplified that for me, is, putting his faith first and following where he thought God would lead him, and then putting his family first and others first, and never compromising on his beliefs. And that is really important to me. So I'd say my dad originally is the person who inspired me to be the best man that I could be and work hard in everything that I wanted to do. Yeah, that was first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think it was my dad as well. Yeah. Growing up, my dad was perfect in my eyes. I was one of the youngest. I was the middle of 5 boys that he had. And growing up with him, he was kind of like that idealistic guy in some ways. He had just loved cooking out, going to the lake, fishing, listening to Led Zeppelin. I don't know. He was just the typical guy in so many ways. He was also kind of a hardy guy, wasn't super emotional. Right. A man's man. He joked around a lot, poked fun at you, wasn't afraid to like beat the crap out of somebody if he wanted to. Right. Growing up, he wasn't as able to because he had like some injuries and everything. He was a carpenter. Like he could make really awesome things. Right. He was a handyman. You know, he knew how to like fix plumbing for somebody. Could put shingles on the roof for you. Like do tons of stuff like that. Like he was just that kind of guy. Right. And I was just in awe of that. Oh my gosh.
It's all good.
And yeah, I was just in awe of it. And growing up, after a while, you start to realize your parents aren't perfect. Right. And that they have some downfalls as well. But you know, like despite any downfalls, it wasn't the downfalls that even caused me to not be inspired by him anymore, but it was maybe those downfalls that caused me to be even more inspired by him. Is because there were a lot of things that he overcame.
Yeah.
And there were things later in his life that like he still wasn't perfect on and went downhill on, but still overcame it after a while, you know?
I feel
and
like
to this day, he is a huge inspiration to me.
I feel like the most inspiring people aren't people who are perfect.
No.
You know, it's not a perfect character in a book.
No.
Like, the most inspiring people are the people that we see struggle, and the people we see that have character flaws and failures, but are able to overcome them.
Yeah.
And are able to learn from their mistakes. Like, those are people that inspire me the most, because just like you said, like, my dad wasn't perfect, you know? He made a lot of mistakes growing up, and there was a point in my life where I despised him. There's a point in my life, you know, when I was in high school where I just did not like him. And then later on in my life, when I was, you know, graduating college and everything, I was like, wow, my dad is amazing. And I didn't see it then, but I see it now.
Right.
And it's like, wow, you know, he wasn't perfect and he said the wrong things here, but like I really understand and appreciate how he overcame his character flaws to really raise me.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of had a big moment of that while I was in college. My first couple years of college, I was having those moments with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I was finally away. I was growing older. I was discovering a lot more out about my family, about people around me that I hadn't known before because I was young. So I was starting to learn a lot of new interesting things and histories of people. And my dad was one of the people who I didn't really like the history or some of the current events that were going down in life, because I was very, very optimistic kid. Very rainbow colored glasses and everything, all that stuff, rose colored glasses. I mean, and yeah, then all of a sudden those glasses came off and I saw reality and I was just like, oh no, like I want to get away from everything. And so I did. I moved to St. Louis. I got away literally from everything and disconnected myself from most of my family for a lot of times. Even though like wasn't like up front, like, hey, I'm disconnecting myself from you, I essentially did.
You just distanced yourself.
I just did distance myself unconsciously in a lot of ways. And yeah, it hasn't been except for the past maybe 4 or 5 years that I've started to realize like, oh yeah, it's not perfection that I should seek.
Right.
It's like the redemption.
Yes.
It's the quality of someone to go through adversity and still be able to stick through it. Exactly. And I had one of those big moments in college when I had a literature professor named Prof. Lay. His name's Doug Lay. And he's like just one of those guys who you just super admire. Yeah. Like, he lost his job at the college because he stood up to the college, because there was this, I'm not going to get too much into it, but there was some stuff that went down at the college that he stood up towards, and the college didn't like that he was standing up to him. You know, and he got fired essentially. He said he stepped down, but he essentially got fired.
Right.
And he was one of these guys who was, everyone loved him. All the students loved him. If you could get rid of almost every professor but keep a few, he would be one of the few that you would keep. And he told us in class one day, he said, I have ADHD. I'm super spastic and everything. And the professors, other professors, when I first got here, told me I shouldn't talk about it. And I didn't talk about it because I was afraid I'd lose credibility. But then finally I started telling my students that I have ADHD, that I take medicine for it to keep myself focused. He said after I started doing that, students came up to me and said, hey, I have these problems, or I have these other problems, or I'm not perfect, I have these problems.
I don't understand how people don't see that vulnerability breeds trust.
Yeah.
It's like even in an authoritative position, like a position of authority, like your professor, like his vulnerability bred trust between the students. Like, I don't understand, people don't understand that.
And he told us that in class. He was just like, all these professors told me not to talk about it, and then I decided to talk about it.
Right.
And now students are coming up to me with their deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah.
Because they trust me and they love my classes. They pay attention more now in my classes because they know that I struggle too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the best things you could find in an inspirational person or thing, is someone who is not willing to pretend that they're perfect, but willing to admit their mistakes and show how you can grow from it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's like what older generations, the best thing they have to offer is telling us their mistakes. Yeah. Telling us things that they messed up on and how they could have fixed it, you know, and that, like, for me, like, when my mentors and my professors tell me that, that's what I learn most from, because, you know, like, again, like we said in previous podcasts, like, adversity it breeds character, and failure is the greatest teacher. And so why not why not share your failures with people who are younger than you, because that helps them to grow if they'll listen, you know. And so like when my mentors share their failures with me or share things that they did wrong, give me advice, like I especially pay attention to that more than I pay attention to things they succeeded with, because I want to mimic their successes,
right,
but I also want to avoid their mistakes.
Yes.
And so I think it's equally important to hear from both, and that inspires me too, to know that, you know, my mentors, as great men as they are, they're not perfect. Right. And you know, through understanding their mistakes, I can become a better man too. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And that's definitely what I hope the most to do as well. You know, I think in a lot of my marriage and family classes, we've learned a lot that children learn so much about how to interact in the world from watching their parents. And if anyone's a parent, they know that that's how children will learn. They pick up on everything, stuff that you never would think that they would pick up on. They pick up on it. And one of the biggest things that my wife and I are realizing is that we never really saw our parents have conflict with each other. You know, so like, and part of that is because Katie's dad was in the military, so he was constantly being shipped overseas and everything, or he was just gone a lot, and her dad wasn't very like one to talk a lot about his emotions anyways, and her mom and dad just talked a lot about it in private, about their emotions and everything, in fights. And then my parents, they were divorced, and I never really saw anything. For all I knew, they were great friends with each other, when in reality they probably argued a lot with each other about different things, hence why they got divorced.
Right.
You know? And in seeing that, you start to realize that you need examples. You need examples of things to teach you how to be a certain way in life. And sadly, in our day and age, parents are getting divorced at like 50% rate. You know, 50% of marriages end in divorce.
That's true.
You know, so many kids are going to grow up without that. The normal nowadays is not the nuclear family where there's a mom and a dad and a few kids and everything. It's mom lives in one town, dad lives in another town.
Right.
Kid goes from house to house every other weekend. Or
instability.
Yeah, it's tons of instability. And I think you can build stability into that, but I don't know. And my biggest sources of inspiration have been the ones that have given me stability, that have given me a way of seeing how reality works and how to grow from reality.
Yeah, and you know, I agree with you, is that people need that stability and people need to grow from the mistakes of the past and everything. I agree with that 100%. It's a really good point that you brought up. Yeah. Yeah,
well, let's move from people. You have a book?
Yeah, okay, so we're going to talk about other sources of inspiration. Let's move on to literature.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of, you know, I'm a huge reader. I taught language arts, you know, in the public school system. I love reading. And, man, I don't even know where to start with this. Okay. As an outdoorsman, one of my greatest sources of inspiration in literature is the great Wendell Berry. If you haven't heard of Wendell Berry, he lives in Kentucky. He's a native Kentuckian. So if you live in Kentucky and you enjoy the outdoors, like, pause the podcast right now and just go look up Wendell Berry. I know that's controversial, but seriously, go look up Wendell Berry right now, because he is a necessary read if you're an outdoorsman and live in Kentucky.
Perfect.
He is a poet and writes essays and short stories about rural life and about conservationism, and I think that he's very important to read. He is a bit of a radical, though, in some senses. So, you know, be prepared for that. You won't agree with everything that he says, but I think it's also very important to, again, like we said in the previous podcast, it's a mark of intelligence to entertain a thought or entertain an idea without fully accepting it. So I think it's very important that you understand what he has to say, because you don't know everything. All right?
Being very accusational.
You as an individual, me as an individual, Nick as an individual, we don't know everything, and it's very important that we hear different ideas, especially ideas that disagree with what we think, because we don't know everything, and we need to get new information, and we need to be exposed to new ways of thinking so we can broaden our horizons and really understand why we believe what we believe. Because Wendell Berry himself, to give you an example, he wrote an essay called "Why He's Not Ever Going to Use a Computer."
Wow.
And that in itself is very controversial to some people. Like, why is this crazy hippie not using computers? You know, he's an author, right? He could use Microsoft Word and spell check stuff. He refuses to do it though for several reasons. One, because let's get a brief background here. In philosophy, a basic rule of philosophy is that if you hold a certain belief, it has to be coherent with reality and correspond to all of your other beliefs. Otherwise, you don't make sense, okay? And I'm going to get to what that means in a second. So it has to be coherent to what you see in reality and correspond to all of the other beliefs that you hold. So Wendell Berry does not believe that it's ethical to coal mine in Kentucky, okay? In the state of Kentucky, it's not ethical to coal mine. So he has that belief. In order for him to hold that belief philosophically, it has to correspond to his other beliefs and be coherent with his other beliefs. So he cannot, in good conscience, waste electricity or use electricity frivolously because that electricity is provided directly by the coal companies.
Wow. So
he cannot use an electronic like the computer in good conscience and in the same breath oppose the coal companies. Right? So this guy 100% is committed to believing what he believes. He believes coal companies and coal in Kentucky is bad. So he won't use as much electricity as he could because he believes that, right? His beliefs correspond with how he lives.
Wow.
That's what I admire about him. So he won't use a computer because he doesn't believe in coal energy. Second, he doesn't think he should use a computer because his wife edits and spell checks everything that he writes on his typewriter, right? His wife edits and spell checks it all. And he believes that consumerist culture makes everything that we use obsolete. So, every year, so we'll throw out new models that are perfectly fine. And because of that, we've lost the art of repairing things. We've lost the art of reusing things. Wow. We've lost the art of recycling things because we'll just throw out our computers and our iPhones and we'll get next year's model, right? Well, that iPhone that you're throwing out, what good is it? Now it's garbage.
Yeah. And
more garbage is bad. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for us as humans. So why would he keep throwing out computers and upgrading computers when his typewriter from the 1960s works just fine? And he knows how to repair it. And he knows how to fix it. So why should he upgrade? Because he doesn't want to be wasteful. And not only that, but his wife, is an intimate part of his writing process. She edits his work and she rereads his work and tells him when he's being dumb, Right. And so to upgrade to a computer would be to call his own wife obsolete and to not need her anymore, so he won't do it. So there's another reason why we won't upgrade to the computer. And so I admire that about him because he's a true philosopher in the fact that his life corresponds to his beliefs, and his beliefs are coherent with each other, We should reuse. Therefore, I'm going to keep using my typewriter. Coal in Kentucky is bad. Therefore, I'm going to minimize my electrical footprint. His thoughts and his life correspond with what he believes. And I really admire that about him, even if I disagree with some of his premises. I like that about him. So yeah, read Wendell Berry. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, I would have to say some of my biggest inspirations like that too have come from literature where it is very just in your face. Mm-hmm. It's very upfront. I think one of my biggest inspirational reads was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, I believe is the guy's name. He's in a concentration camp, during the whole Nazi Germany stuff. And
that stuff.
That stuff that happened.
That stuff that happened
to the Jewish people where they're had genocide. Yeah, that stuff. So it's insane. Because he writes from a psychological standpoint too, and it's insane just the depth that he goes into with his descriptions of the concentration camps and the psychological torture and physical torture that they were put in during those times. Mm-hmm. But what's so inspiring was he would talk about how no matter how bad it got, there were people who were still able to survive, I should say. They were still able to survive. And he found that there were so many people who were able to survive because of the community that they formed together, despite being tortured and imprisoned and gassed and just put in the worst conditions. The people that he was in that community with just had such a strong bond together, and there was a huge spiritual component of it too that kept them going, and it just kept them moving along and made them stronger together. And I think and I had to read that book actually right before going on a backpacking trip.
Yeah.
Just to show you like how much your body can actually withstand.
Right.
Because that was a big part of the book too, is talking about how little food they had, how little water they had, and how much physical activity they had to go through, but how much they could go through when you had at least something to like hope for, something to hold on to. And such a big part of it was based on having a hope for something to get to. And
you can endure much more than you think you can.
Oh, yeah. And, a big part of that has caused me to think to myself, like, this might be a weird statement, but before, whenever I believed that heaven was a thing I wanted to hope for, I couldn't wait to get to heaven, I actually found myself not caring as much about things in the day-to-day. Of course I cared about things because I had to get enough, like, good Christian points to get to heaven and everything, but...
It's fundamental misunderstanding of Christianity.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's my point. Which is that there was that constant understanding of, if I can't wait till Jesus comes back just so I can get to heaven.
Right.
But in saying that, I was disregarding a ton of people whose lives I could help make better.
Right.
I was disregarding so many people because I was so focused on my own fulfillment and the thing that I hoped for, not realizing that one of the biggest aspects, maybe the biggest aspect of Jesus' teaching, was that you should care for people in the here and now.
The heart change.
Yeah, bringing heaven to earth. Bringing this thing that you... Like the Jewish people in the Psalms and everything throughout the whole entire Old Testament could not wait for redemption. They could not wait for things to be better, for it to be freed from oppression, from Babylon or anything else. They were constantly hoping for something better. And then finally, we got to this idea where we actually disregarded a bunch of people and hoped for this really selfish betterment in a way. We didn't care about the people who were potentially going to suffer in life. We just wanted ourselves to be in this paradise.
Yeah.
And that probably comes from being unoppressed in a lot of ways.
Not being persecuted.
Not being persecuted. That probably is what it comes from. But yeah, like just reading that about Viktor Frankl and him putting it in the words that he did just gave me such a clear insight into how, kind of like what you said with your dad, how privileged you are to be able to speak English.
Yeah. Just
to be able to speak English in America gives you such great opportunities in this world, in the entire world, really, but especially here. And just, getting to benefit from all the things that your dad did for you.
Yeah. And
hopefully give you that same mindset to push forward and provide even better for your kids, to where they feel even more privileged than even you feel.
Yeah.
That's something that's some literature that has deeply inspired me, that keeps me realizing how good I have it and how much worse I could have it.
Yeah, it's true. And I want to touch on the point, too, that you said earlier of being so in the future that you forget the today.
Yeah.
And like you're so focused on, I get to go to heaven. I'm forgetting about these people I could help. And that's what true Christianity is about. It's not about getting to heaven,
Right.
C.S. Lewis, who's another huge inspiration of mine, along with John Wesley, who's another huge inspiration of mine, wrote multiple sermons, John Wesley did at least, about how Christianity is about the internal heart change. Like getting to heaven and being saved from your sins and being justified in the eyes of God, like that's what God does for you. And that's great. That's the beginning of your journey. That's what God does for you, and that changes you inside. But that is the source of your change, right? What happens next is you're born again, according to John Wesley, and now you are free to love God and love others. And that is now your new mission. It's not about being so focused on heaven, but now it's about living out that joy, living out that love, and letting it pour out into other people. It's a character change. And John Wesley even goes so far as to say, because there was a problem in his time where people were getting baptized and saying that, oh, I'm going to heaven now, I can live however I want, right? Like, I've been baptized, I'm born again, I'm going to heaven. I don't have to love anyone, I don't have to give anything, I don't have to sacrifice myself. And John Wesley saying that that's not true. That's not what Jesus meant. When Jesus said you have to be born again, it's not just the act of being baptized. It's literally the act of having your heart changed by him. And the heart change is marked by loving other people, by your life being radically changed. You're leaving your life of sin. You're leaving the bad things you used to do, and now you're living to serve other people and help other people and serve God. And John Wesley goes so far as to say that if you're not doing those things, then you're not saved. You're not actually a Christian. And I tend to agree with him. Like, that inspires me, because I'm like, it's not a works-based faith where I'm not going to heaven because I did enough good things, but because of what God's done for me, it makes me want to do good things, and that's how I know that I'm safe. That kind of deal. I like John Wesley because he tells it like it is, like that. He's very much a practical Christian, where he says Christianity is a practical faith. Yeah. I enjoy that about him. C.S. Lewis says the same things.
Yeah. Well, and even if you're not, like, for those of you listening, even if you're not a Christian, if you're not a religious person, like, this thought, this concept that Wesley and others put out isn't one foreign to anyone else. Like, if you're not a Christian, you can still realize to yourself, oh, like, yeah, I'm a good person, because I'm constantly striving to be a good person.
Yeah,
I'm constantly putting in the work. I'm constantly, my aim isn't just to be selfish and to get a nice house and to live well and sit on a beach and sip margaritas.
What the motivations in my heart.
Yeah, your motivations in your heart, if those are constantly geared towards making things better, not just for yourself, but for others around you, then you're on the right path. Like, you're on a good track. And that's the path that Jesus and other, like, spiritual leaders, that weren't in a cult, want you to have. Like, those are the goals that they want you to have, and those are the goals you should want to have. And people like Viktor Frankl, people like C.S. Lewis, John Wesley, and others, those are the goals that they want you to have too.
Yeah, and it's, again, like you're saying, like, that's the goal, is to be a person of character. And it's not necessarily about the action that you do, because you can do a good action but not have the right motivations to do it. Yeah. We see it all the time where corporations come out with commercials or donate to a bunch of charity, but the motivation behind the heart is to earn money. The motivation is selfish. Or, we do it too. Like, when we help somebody, but the motivation is to gain prestige. Right. Or the motivation is to feel better about our own selves. Yeah. Like, we want to get to a place where we're a person of character enough that we're helping somebody for the sake of doing it, for the sake of helping them, or we're doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, not just because it makes us feel good, And so that's the core of Jesus' teaching, is what's your heart? Yes. What's the motivation of your heart? Like, do you give to charity because you feel like you're supposed to, or do you give to charity out of the love that you feel? And that's the difference. But Jesus is a big inspiration for me, obviously, and for those of you who aren't Christians listening, please don't alienate me just because this is what I believe. I want to respect you, and I want you to respect me, and that's fine. And like I said, entertain a thought. Entertain your thought without accepting it. And, hopefully we can all learn something new. But moving on to more secular sources of inspiration, I want to talk one more thing about Wendell Berry. And I'm sorry, I will move on to the next source of inspiration. But as an educator, Wendell Berry and John Dewey. If you haven't read John Dewey and you're an educator, go read John Dewey, Experiential Education. All right. But Wendell Berry has a quote from one of his essays in the collection of essays, What Are People For? There's a quote in the essay titled A Remarkable Man that really gave me a huge inspiration for our adventure education program. And that was this quote. It reads, "What a trial, in fact, that is for us. How guilty it proves us that we think it ordinary to spend 12 or 16 or 20 years of a person's life and many thousands of public dollars on, quote, education, and not a dime or even a thought on a person's character." Wow. We'll spend years and thousands of dollars teaching people how to do things and giving them training and education and tools to be successful. But we won't mention one time how to be a good man or woman. Mm-hmm. We leave that in the hands of their parents or their peers. And some people don't have the best of those. You know, and I understand that public education can only go so far. And you know, we have to standardize that. And I get that. But man, shouldn't there be some sort of training for character? Because I don't want to just train somebody who's really good at math, but is a liar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't want to train somebody who can write the greatest essays in the world and beautiful poetry, but is an awful individual. Mm-hmm. We want role models. We want people who can build a bridge and do it for the right reasons. We want people who can write essays and petition governments for good and not for selfish gain, you know? And I feel like that's what education should be about. Yeah. Is developing the individual as a whole. Not just their skills, but their skills and their character. Yeah. And I agree with Wendell Berry on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. What was the next thing of inspiration?
Okay, so we did quotes, we did literature, we did individuals. How about a memory or a trip outside that inspired you?
Wow. You know, I don't know. I've definitely had some pretty inspirational moments outside. So many to count from. But I remember distinctly one I'll definitely never forget. That almost always comes to my mind. I was sitting on the edge of a cliff, meditating, and I'm looking out at the river. And we just got done rock climbing, and I'm looking out at the river, and I'm just thinking about how it was in that time that I realized that I wanted to do an outdoor program, business for, you know, teaching people for therapeutic reasons. You know, I realized like that's what I really want to do. But it was also in that moment where I was so afraid of it. Like, I'm looking out at this river, I'm looking out at the trees from sitting up on this cliff, being afraid that a mountain lion's going to attack the back of my neck. You know, it's in this moment, maybe that's why I was so afraid, but I was just so afraid of messing up. I was so afraid of coming out as a fraud.
Right.
You know, being a fraud, of someone saying like, who are you to do this? Or, you know, me teaching students how to rock climb, but I'm afraid of heights.
Right.
You know, and I was so afraid of taking a leap and being someone who could potentially be a teacher or a quote unquote professional expert or something on any of this and lead people in this. I was so afraid of it, but I strangely still had this desire of telling myself, it doesn't matter how afraid you are of screwing up. It doesn't matter how fearful you are of these moments. Like, this is what you are meant to do. Like, this is, no matter, because I've been afraid of a lot of things, and I've stopped myself from doing things because I was afraid. I stopped myself in high school from playing football because I was afraid of a dude tackling me and wiping me out.
It's valid fear. It's valid fear.
I was afraid of wrestling because of just like how strong these other guys was that I was wrestling, and they're just like wiping me out, and just the intensity of it all. And I was like, no, that's not really for me. You know, there were many things that I walked away from, but sitting on the edge of that cliff with other guys and girls like hiking and backpacking and rock climbing, I just realized, like, no, this is the thing that I'm probably the most afraid of, but it's the thing that I most want to do, and that no one can tell me that I'm not gonna do it either. Not even myself.
Yeah.
Like, I had that moment of like, Nick, you probably shouldn't do this. And then I'm like, no, I'm doing this. Like, you can't even tell me not to do it. And that's probably one of my biggest moments of me telling myself to like buck up, to do what you're meant to do, and to not let anyone tell you that you can't do it. Wow. And to find everyone and anyone who will push that forward and to gravitate towards them. And thank God that my wife wants to do it just as much as I do.
Right.
You know, and that we came here and became friends with you and Hannah, who want nothing more than to do that same thing. And yeah, that's probably one of my biggest memories, you know, that I have of having that.
That's awesome. I never heard that before. So that's really reassuring to me too, as a business partner, as a friend. You know,
yeah.
That like, wow, you know, you're in this.
It's like, check, Nick's not gonna leave.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I mean, like, what an amazing, you know, gift it was that me and my wife found you too. And that found you and Katie, because my wife, you know...
It's okay. You can just say me.
Because my wife is so supportive, too. You know, she is, you know, a serious outdoors woman, loves being outside, and, you know, went and picked cilantro for her guacamole.
Yes.
And, you know, she wants to do what you're doing, you know, marriage and family therapy and recreational therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And she just wants to combine it with what we're doing. And we're all about building character, and we're all about doing it in an outdoor setting. And like, it's just, it meshes so well. We're so glad. You know, that's awesome that you said that. For me, a memory that's inspiring to me, and I know I've been talked about my faith a lot this episode, but you know what? Yeah, that's who I am, so we might as well keep talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't agree with me, that's fine. Like, again, I'm not going to be angry with you or anything like that. I'm not going to tell you not to listen. Like, please listen, because I'm not always going to talk about Christianity. I'm going to talk about my experiences outdoors and all that stuff. But I think it's important that you know me. And my faith is part of who makes me me.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk about it not ashamed.
Well, and I think a good just thing to preface all this, to preface all the rest of our episodes where we do talk about religion and spirituality.
Right.
Because we'll end up having like a whole episode on that type of stuff eventually. If you're like you, Keegan, as a Christian, and me as a Christian, like, I'd say we're cool Christians.
I hope so. Yeah.
I'd say that we're acceptable Christians.
Yeah.
There are Christians out there who people will look down on and be like, oh my gosh.
Judging people.
I can't believe you think that. I can't believe
God,
you
you drink alcohol.
But not to be like very, again, full of myself, but I think we're the type of Christians who people should listen to about Christianity.
Right.
You know, and I think that you're an amazing example of it. And from here on out, you know, I don't think we should have to, you know, preface it or anything else, because
put a disclaimer on
because I personally think that we're great.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we are people who other people should model after in some instances, because
we don't judge people.
We don't judge people. We're okay with not being perfect.
Human beings.
Yeah. We're all right. We're doing okay.
I appreciate you saying that, Nick. That means a lot to me. And yeah, I mean, just to apologize for all the Christians for people who have had experiences where Christians have judged them super harshly and been jerks to them and stuff like that. We're not trying to do that here. We're not trying to force our religion down anybody's throat. We're not trying to tell you you're a bad person for not being Christian. We're not trying to breed any sort of hate or anything like that. That's just, you know, those are my beliefs. I believe that Jesus was God, and I believe in what he said, and that's it. You know,
boom.
You know, that's literally it. So I don't have any sort of agenda other than that. You know, so that's it. I'm not trying to make any sort of political statement or anything like that. But my experience, I was out in the woods, and we were doing, I guess it was like a 7 or 8 day trip in Big South Fork, which is in Tennessee. And we were out there, and we had scheduled this time where we had 2 full hours devoted to just meditating.
Wow.
So I went out into the woods, and I found this tree, and I sat down under it. And I never, and I think that a lot of people like this, I've never in my life, unless I was sleeping or taking a nap, just sat and done nothing for 2 hours.
Wow.
That
sounds horrible.
That's the first time, yeah. That's the first time in my entire life where I've just sat and done nothing for 2 hours.
Wow.
And it was amazing.
I bet.
It was incredible. So I sat there and I meditated. I didn't even think too hard about things because our mind tends to race. But, you know, one of the beautiful things about being out in the wilderness is that things are much simpler. And you can, in fact, stop your mind from racing because you just, distance-wise, you are physically far away from your problems. You know, from the responsibilities of everyday life. You're physically far away from them. And so it's easier for you to relax and think clearly about things, you know? So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking clearly and peacefully about things and just letting my mind be clear. And I'm praying, of course, and, I'm praying during this time, and I'm just enjoying myself. And I'm sitting so still that birds like begin to land near where I'm sitting, and like they're not disturbed by me sitting there up against that tree. And I'm hearing things that I normally don't hear out in the woods because I'm too busy and focused on where I'm stepping and if the trip's going well, and how the participants are feeling. But I'm hearing and experiencing the raindrops of the dew and the wind, and I'm smelling, and it's wonderful. And all of a sudden, like, this thought just floods me, and I'm sitting in my mind's eye, in my imagination. I see myself sitting up against a great big cedar tree, and my back feels so supported by it, and I'm sitting up and I'm comfortable, and I inhale through my nose, and I smell so clearly the smell of cedar wood, and it fills my nostrils, and I smell it so clear, and it's a beautiful and wonderful smell. And I feel more at peace than I've ever felt. And the thought comes in my mind because at this point in my life, I've been going through some struggles. I was about to get married, and I was stressed, and I had been struggling with my faith too, and I'm just going through several different things, a bunch of transitions in my life. And at that point, I felt immediate peace, and I heard this thought in my head that said, like, just as you rely on the cedar tree that you're sitting up against to support you, and just as you can feel peaceful putting all your weight up against it, so is God so faithful that you could put the full weight of your burden and expectation and hopes and dreams and life upon him. You can lean up against him just as you can lean up against the cedar tree, and he'll give you peace. And that changed my life.
Wow.
That thought changed my life, and that smell, and to this day, when I smell cedar wood, it reminds me of that memory, because the smell was so strong and so clear. And I'll never forget that God is so faithful to me, and has proved himself been so faithful to me, that I can rely on him in all situations and all things, and live above my circumstances. And I feel like that's the unique privilege that Christians have, is that even when everything in their life has gone wrong, and by all means and by the world's standards you should be depressed and you should feel awful about what's happened, you can have some form of peace by knowing that God is faithful and ultimately has your fate secure. And so just as I can lean up against a strong tree and trust that the tree will not break with my weight against it, I can put the weight of my burdens on God and know that he will not break and take care of them. That's probably the biggest epiphany and inspiration I've had out in the wild. And I hope that everybody has an experience like that, Christian or not, just that you have an experience like that.
Holy
it's pretty
cow.
Cool.
Man, that's awesome.
It was.
I have to say, to wrap up this podcast, this is the longest podcast we've done so far.
How long have we gone so far?
We're at an hour 02.
All right.
I have to wrap it up. We've gotten this deep and sentimental. As I'm sitting here listening to you talk about this, I just think to myself, man, I'm so glad that Keegan and I are doing this podcast together.
Right.
Like, I'm so happy that we're friends and that we're doing this together.
Yeah, me too.
We're like working towards this whole business thing. And I think for those of you out there who hopefully have been taking notes, hopefully you haven't stopped listening by this point, because that was probably like some of the greatest stuff I've heard, is if you ever go into business with someone, if you ever get into a relationship with someone, if you ever find a friend, find someone who you feel inspired by. Because my biggest, something I'm so thankful of, is that I feel inspired by you, is that I feel inspired by you. I feel inspired by Hannah. I feel inspired by Katie. All three people who I hope to spend the rest of my life with in a career and in friendship with, and, Katie in a marriage with, and everything. And I am devoting so much commitment to Katie, and I'm also devoting so much commitment to us as friends, as us as partners, and everything else too. And so I think, all of you, as you near the end of this podcast, as you're taking notes, write down to put people around you who inspire you, and make those people your friends.
Yes.
And family and partners and everything else in life.
Not only does that mean a lot to me that you would say that, but it's also so true, and stuff that I really hope that you, as a listener, take into consideration, is that you become the people you hang out with. So surround yourself with good influences, and surround yourself with people that will inspire you and push you to be a better man, because I feel like Nick always is challenging me to be the best version of me I can be. And that's really the best thing you can hope for in a friendship, is that somebody will push you to be the best person you can be.
Yeah. Because if you listen to our episode on pooping in the woods, we got at least up to rank 6 or 7. Maybe number like 9 or 10 is being able to poop in the woods with your best friend while watching a deer who's pooping in the wood with its best friend.
Right, with a scenic view.
With a scenic view. That's the best thing you could aspire towards.
That is the best thing in life. That is the best thing in life.
All right. Well, hey.
This is Bear Burrito.
I have one thing to end on. We got a message on Twitter. I had reached out to you all and asked you to send us things that you might want to hear, and I got one. It's from Katie. It says oh sorry, I totally messed that up. Very dyslexic. Katie going abroad. She asked to do,
and just to specify, that's not your Katie.
No, this is not my wife Katie.
Okay,
this is a Katie who I've never met in my life.
Gotcha.
Ever. And I know a couple Katies, and I thought maybe it was another Katie I know. I don't know this Katie.
Okay.
Katie, if I know you, I'm sorry. But I'm pretty sure I don't know you. She said to do a show on getting started in outdoor industry.
Ooh.
She's a blogger. She just recently put out a blog called The Top 5 Places to Eat in Asheville, North Carolina, which was today, which as you're listening to this might be like a couple days or weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But, so she's a blogger. Katie's Going Places, .wordpress.com. Go check her out. She's an adventure, traveler, climber, yada, 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 college student as well. But yeah, she asked us to do an episode on getting started in outdoor industry, which we are.
Absolutely.
Like, we're getting started. And I think
we could totally do that.
I think although we're not professionals, like in the sense that we've been at this for like 20 years.
Right.
I think we can bring a unique perspective.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we're just getting started. We're seeing all the things that you need to do to get started in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a great part of this podcast is going to be showing you that process as it unfolds.
Right.
And we will devote like an episode to getting started, the things that we're learning along the way. And I hope you guys can benefit from it as well.
That sounds like the next topic of conversation for our next podcast. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah. Send us your feedback. Send us your suggestions. Again, we're small right now, so we'll hear you. We'll see you.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So this is the Bear Burrito. Stay saucy. Thank you.
Yeah, sauce it up.
Bye.